Let's make a hobo stove. So all you really need is a can opener, obviously, and specifically a can opener with this V or sharp pry opener here. I'm not sure what this is called. This one has both, just like a bottle opener here with the blunt round edge end, and then this one has the sharp end, I guess just to open it up for liquids and things. So you want this type specifically. The rotary helps to obviously take a can and open it. Next you need a can, and that's pretty much all you really need. A good knife as well is needed. So a good knife, a good stout, sturdy knife, preferably with a serrated blade, will be needed. And so first things we're gonna do is we'll set these aside, and we're gonna just mark out some areas. After a while you can kind of eyeball this, and we have this center line here on most cans, and I'm just gonna go across from that and create another kind of a center line here. Okay, this is where we want our first punch, and we can have a punch here, and we're going to create perpendicular lines here on this side. Okay, like so. So the first things that I like to do when I make this is we want to basically create these we'll just say these little feet, and this helps to support your pot or whatever that you're trying to heat up. We take our can opener and we want to basically open up a hole like so, and just pop it open and pull it all the way through like so, like that. Okay, and kind of leave it up, kind of curl it down. Be careful, these ends are sharp. You will cut yourself if you're not careful. And then directly opposite of that, on this other line, do the same thing. Just kind of peel that up like so. Now we've got two. Okay, so that's going to be our eyes, okay, or our little feet. And what this will be used for is whatever you're cooking can sit above it to allow more oxygen to come through. Okay, so be careful, these are very sharp. You can cut yourself if you're not careful making one of these. So I'm just bending these down, the ends down a little bit more so they're not sticking us, to be safe. So then the next step that we're going to need to do is we need to make these convection holes here at the base. Okay, so this works very much similar to a rocket stove or a Dakota fire pit, which basically heats up the air. It's fed by oxygen that comes through these holes here, and the fuel is fed through the back, and it's superheated, and so you need very little fuel to create intense amounts of heat. So this is the efficiency of this type of stove, real easy to make stove. So you need very little fuel, very little tools to make it. So what we're going to do is we're going to make the convection holes at the base. So I'm going to put one in the middle here, and this is going to be one. I'm going to put 5 in, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. So there are 5 convection holes basically in the front. So from this half of the can, from this line here to this line, I've got my 5 convection holes punched in. Okay, now comes the tricky part. Okay, and this is the dangerous part. So in the back of this is we want to punch a hole and cut a hole out. That's going to be how we're going to feed our stove. Okay, so that's when you take your blade and make sure it's locked, and this is got a pretty sharp pointed in, and got some serrations here. So what I want to do is, it's going to awkward with the camera, so I want to be very careful. Okay, hold this steady and punch. Okay, and this is just a cheap blade. Don't use your good blade for this. Punch down, and one more should do it. Okay, like so. So what you then would do is, I'm going to make sure that this, like that. Okay, then what you do is carefully press that in. Okay, so this is catching on the sides. I don't want to cut myself, so I'm just going to use a towel, kind of help push that in for me. This is when a pair of gloves or a pair of pliers come in handy. I don't want to cut myself, but I just take the pliers and just crunch this down. Not necessarily, you could probably use a stick to do it, or wrap your hand in something tough to break that down. Okay, these edges will be sharp, so that's why I use these pliers for this demo, to be safe about it, because I could just tell my finger was going to run along the edge of one of these and cut myself pretty good. So be careful. So essentially, this is your hobo stove. That's the structure. So what you can do is you can go to the hardware store and get some grate like this, depending on the size, and it just goes right over the top. Okay, you could grill some meat on top of here. It could be a grate to set a smaller item, to boil water, or to cook a can of tuna or something like so. Again, you could use a regular sized can to make this, and then this can, the old tuna can, would fit perfectly on here, but this won't fit because it's too small. That's why a handy grate would be good. Or just make sure whatever goes on top, like this clay piece here that's already been fired, will just sit nicely on top of the feet that we created, and we can boil or cook water, or boil some stew, and this is basically how you would feed it, is through the back. Here is where you put your twigs in, through the back. So this is a hobo stove, and this is it's not primitive, because obviously we're reusing thrown away materials. But I'm trying to be a pragmatist, and I like to be self-sufficient, and so knowing these little hacks, if you will, is good to know in a pinch. Practicing primitive technology requires a lot of time in the field, a lot of dirt time. It requires resources, and it requires time in general to get the resources, process the resources. So in a real emergency situation, you use what you can to get by. And so that's why I like these really simple resilient living type of tactics and tools. So this is pretty lightweight to carry. It is noisy if you were trying to be stealthy, but in our society there's plenty of canned goods thrown away, so I'm sure one wouldn't have to look too far to find an empty can to turn into a serviceable stove. So that's the hobo stove.